السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم وأكمل التحيات على سيدنا ونبينا محمد خير البريات وعلى آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Alhamdulillah. In our class on Tariqa al-Muhammadiyya, the path of Muhammad, this great work on operationalizing mindfulness of God, on Taqwa, and how to bring it into one's life by the great Ottoman era scholar Imam al-Birgivi. May Allah be well pleased with him. We are looking today at the treatment of envy. And this is the third investigation on envy. And so we looked at what is envy and how it's understood and defined. Then we looked at its opposite as well, of what is envy is you want another to lose the good that they have. Whereas the believer is called upon to have the opposite of envy. What is the opposite of envy? To have nasiha or nush is you have to have goodwill, sincere concern, to truly care about the good of another. As we looked at that and its importance. So today, on how one treats envy, right? Which is of the most destructive of vices, because it goes against huwa khilafu mawdu'i wa madhhar ad-din. Envy goes against the subject of religion and its expression. Imam al-Birgivi says, البحث الثالث في العلاج العلمي والعملي, right, on the knowledge-based and practice-based treatment of envy. الأول أن تعلم أن الحسد ضرر عليك في الدنيا والدين. The first, the knowledge treatment of envy is to know with certitude that envy is pure harm for you in your worldly life and in your religion, as we saw in the harms of envy previously. And those of you who are joining us just from today, you can access the previous lessons related to this, whether through our YouTube playlist or by registering in the class, and you can have the previous lessons from there. وأنه لا ضرر فيه على المحسود فيهما. And there is no harm on the one being envied, whether in this life or the next. Right? Because no one can change the creating of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بل ينتفع به فيهما. Rather, the one envied benefits both in this life and in the next. أما ضرره لك في الدين فلأنك بالحسد سخطت قضاء الله تعالى وكرهت نعمته التي قسمها لعباده. The harm for you in envy in your religion is that through envy you have consciously or unconsciously, and usually unconsciously, been displeased with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Whereas one of the integrals of faith, what is it? وَأَن تُؤْمِنَ بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ مِنَ اللَّهِ. That you have complete certitude and belief in decree and destiny, that it's good and bad are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الرضا بالقضاء, to be content with all that Allah has decreed. وَكَرِهْتَ نعمته, when you disliked Allah's blessing, التي قسمها لعباده, that Allah has apportioned to His servants. So, of course, you're not doing this consciously, but unconsciously you are disliking, and it's as if you are questioning divine wisdom. وَعَدْلَهُ, and you've disliked the justice of Allah. Are you more just than Allah? Are you more merciful than Allah? Are you more wise than Allah? Are you more generous than Allah? وَاسْتَنْكَرْتَ ذَلِكَ, right? وَغَشَشْتَ, and you disliked, or you questioned the divine act. Why did God do this? Right? Right? And you did not have goodwill towards God. Right? You're unconscious having ill will towards God. Right? وَعَفْوًا وَغَشِشْتَ رَجُلًا مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and you cheated one of the believers. Right? وَتَرَكْتَ نُصْحَهُ وَالْغِشُّ حَرَامٌ وَالنَّصِيحَةُ وَاجِبَةٌ, and you left having goodwill towards him, and having ghish, right? Having ghish, cheating a believer, right? Because it's the right of the believer that you have goodwill towards them, that you have sincere concern for their good. Anytime you leave that, that is a type of non-material ghish, because ghish is to cheat another. The easy cheating is the material cheating. It's obvious, you took someone's money, give it back. When you leave goodwill towards another, that is much more difficult. Recognize, it's much more difficult to extricate. Well, and cheating another, right? And here cheating is by not having goodwill towards them, that you're required to have, is prohibited, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ghashana falaysa minna." Whoever cheats us is not of us. So there's material cheating, but not having goodwill towards another is cheating them, is depriving them of a non-material right that they have over you. Which are many. Haqqul Muslimi ala al-Muslim, there are so many rights. The summary of all those rights is وَالنُّصْحُ لِكُلِّ Muslim, to have goodwill towards everyone. And inshallah, if we can just remind, there is one of the strangely neglected works, but maybe it's neglected because it's so large. Imam Ibn Hajar al-Haytami has a 1,000-page plus book on how to fulfill rights. And the book's it's kind of encyclopedic in a sense, but it has a whole slew of gems within it. One of the gems in it is, of the many, is that Ibn Hajar al-Haytami summarizes 60 rights of companionship, adab al-suhbah. So he took Imam as-Sulami's work on adab al-suhbah, on the rights of keeping the company of others, and he summarized it into 60 proper manners. And we can share that, inshallah. Just remind me, because I saved the PDF separately. That's a very beneficial thing. It's brief. It's just 60 points. And goodwill is obligatory for the reasons we saw last week. Ad-Dinu Nasiha, religion is sincere concern. Right? And religion is sincere concern. Why? Because it is the pillar of religion. Its support. Right? Or its reality. So some of the ulama said, this hadith, religion is sincere concern, is a quarter of religion. Imam Nawawi said, no, it is religion itself. Right? Because what is religion? Religion is to seek good in your relating to God, and to seek good in your relating to the book of God, and seeking good in your relating to the messenger of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and seeking good with respect to God's creation. In particular, seeking good with respect to those responsible for the affairs of the community, right? By supporting them, assisting them, following them, etc., advising them, all the aspects of nasiha, respect to the leadership of the community, and seeking good with respect to the common person. And these elements, and that's why the hadith of nasiha is something one goes back to again and again. That's why the commentator, quoting Imam Nawawi, said that's why it was the most frequent counsel of the early Muslims. Right? And we have a lot of resources on seekers about religion is sincere concern because of that, because the Mashaykh would always emphasize this meaning. وَأَمَّا فِي الدُّنْيَا فَغَمٌّ وَحُزْنٌ وَضِيقُ نَفْسٍ. As for in this life, right, the envy is sorrow, is worry and sorrow and constriction of self. وأما أنه لا ضرر على المحسود له فيهما فظاهر لأن النعمة لا تزول عنه بحسدك ولا يأثم به. And as for the person envied not being harmed by it, by your envy of them, it's evident because they don't lose their blessing because of your envy, and they don't sin. No sin befalls them if you envy them. Right? وما انتفاعه في الآخرة فهو أنه مظلوم من جهتك لا سيما إذا أخرجك الحسد إلى القول والفعل بالغيبة له وهتك سره والقدح فيه ونحوها. And as for the one envied benefiting in the hereafter due to your envy, and that is because he is wronged by you, particularly if your envy caused you to speak ill of them or to act wrongfully towards them, such as if you engaged in backbiting or you uncovered their secrets, right? Engaging in any of the aspects of talebearing, right? Which is devastating, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, لا يدخل الجنة نمام. The talebearer shall not enter paradise. What's meant by it? As Imam al-Kumushkhanawi rahimahullah ta'ala explains, meaning these hadiths that so and so will not enter Jannah, meaning they will not be of those whose sins are overlooked, right? From whom judgment is easy, right? Because there's some people who enter paradise بغير حساب, without reckoning. There's others يحاسبوا حسابا يسيرا, they have an easy reckoning. But there are things that you will be taken to account tafsilan. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, and we saw in the class on Bukhari, من نوقش الحساب عذب. Whoever is taken to task in their reckoning is tormented. Meaning, then their reckoning will be experienced as torment, because it'll be tough, right? It'll be tough, right? So that is the and to criticize them and the like of it. فهذه هدايا تهديها إليه فينتفع بها في الآخرة. So these are gifts you're sending the one you envy, and they benefit from them in the hereafter. Right? So if you really don't like them, don't do that. Right? That's why the commentator mentions Al-Hasan al-Basri. Right? Right? And it's a beautiful quote. It says, وروي عن الحسن البصري رضي الله تعالى عنه أن رجلا قال له إن فلانا قد اغتابك فبعث إليه طبقا من الرطب. Right? فقال بلغني أنك أهديت إلي حسنات فأردت أن أكافئك عليها فاعذرني فإني لا أقدر أن أكافئك بها على التمام. Right? So a man told Al-Hasan al-Basri that there's this person who is backbiting you. So Sayyidina Al-Hasan al-Basri sent him a tray of fresh dates. And he said, it has reached me that you have gifted me good deeds. So I wanted to compensate you for them, to thank you for them. Right? To respond appropriately, but please forgive me, I cannot sufficiently respond to what you've done for me so fully, but this is what I could do. And similar is related from Imam Abu Hanifa. Okay? وأما في الدنيا فلأن أهم أغراض الخلق مساءة الأعداء وغمهم. Says, as for the one envied, benefiting in worldly terms is because the greatest of aims of enemies, meaning worldly enemies, is that their enemy be in a bad state and that your enemy be concerned. Right? And there's people like that. They say love and hate are very similar. Right? So the true friend, what do? يَضُرُّ نَفْسَهُ لِيَنْفَعَكَ. Right? As related from Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, right? إِنَّ صَدِيقَكَ الْحَقَّ مَنْ كَانَ مَعَكَ وَيَضُرُّ نَفْسَهُ لِيَنْفَعَكَ وَإِذَا شَدَائِدُ الزَّمَانِ صَدَعَتْكَ شَتَّتَ شَمْلَهُ لِيَجْمَعَكَ. That your true friend is the one who remains with you, the one who would hurt himself to benefit you. And if the circumstances of life scatter you, he would break himself to gather you back. That's the friend. But the true enemy is like that. Right? يَضُرُّ نَفْسَهُ لِيَضُرَّكَ. Like he would hurt himself just so that you can be hurt. Right? So if he was really your enemy and you're just being short-sighted in worldly terms, although the true believer doesn't think like this. But if this is min tanazzulan, that even if you think in worldly concerns, in worldly terms, even in worldly terms, it makes no sense to be envious of someone else. Because you're being tormented by your envy would please him if he was just a worldly enemy. Well, so, and rather you see the nusх of the Prophet ﷺ. In battle, he was praying for his enemy. Right? You can review the Battle of Uhud to see. Allahumma hdi qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. They're trying to kill him. At Uhud, and he's saying, oh Allah, guide my people, for they do not know. Right? والعلاج العملي أن يكلف نفسه نقيض مقتضاه. Right? The practical treatment, and you need both. You need the knowledge-based treatment and the practice-based treatment. Together are effective medicine. Right? The practical treatment is that you force yourself to act, you force yourself to uphold the opposite of envy, which is nusх, which is uphold, actively practice goodwill towards the other. Actively practice sincere concern for their good. فإن بعثه على القدح فيه كلف لسانه المدح له. If envy would cause you to criticize another, then force yourself to praise him with your tongue. وإن على التكبر عليه, and if it would cause you to arrogate yourself over them, who is he anyways? ألزم نفسه التواضع له, you force yourself to be humble with them. والاعتذار إليه, and to make excuses for them. وإن على كف الإنعام عليه, and if it would cause you to withhold giving them some good, ألزم نفسه الزيادة في الإنعام, you would force yourself to give them more than you would normally give. وإن على الدعاء عليه, and if it would cause you to make dua against them, دعا له بزيادة النعمة التي حسده فيها, then you make dua for them that Allah grant them more than what you envied for them. But the ulama also mention a subtle point here, that if you feel envious of someone, you want to make dua for them, make dua for their worldly good, their general worldly good first, then their general religious good second, then the subject of the envy. Why? Because if you immediately make dua for what you're envying them about, it's very easy for the nafs to step in. Right? So if you envy someone about, they're having better memorization than you, then you could easily say, oh Allah, please enable Ghain to benefit from what he memorizes and to actually bring it into practice. And so it's, the athar of the traces of the envy are likely to be manifest in your dua for them. So the way you make dua, if you feel envy or any negativity towards another, is to first make dua for their dunya in general. Oh Allah, I ask you that you bless them in their work and in their family and in in all things that they direct themselves to, and protect their health and their wealth, and general worldly dua, right, for the broad good. Then you make dua for the general and preserve the blessings of faith and guidance and good for them and for their family and their loved ones, right? And that helps get rid of, because the envy is a point of sensitivity that you have. It's hard to directly ask for it unless you got a very pure heart and just fell in there. Then when you get to the point of envy, then it's much easier to make a goodwill dua untouched by the pains and pangs of envy. Wallahu alam, right? So this is the treatment. The fourth, he says, al-mabhath al-rabi', the fourth discussion related to envy. في العلاج القلعي, the treatment of removing envy. So you treat envy first by understanding and practice. But then if it's already there, you also need to extricate it. Allah, how do you remove envy? So there's a healing process through knowledge and practice, which is active goodwill. But then there's also, how do you extricate it? And the further you can be from not letting the trait become rooted in the heart, the easier it is to get rid of it. He says, في العلاج القلعي وهو يحتاج إلى معرفة أسبابه ثم إزالتها. So the treatment through removal of envy requires knowing the causes of envy and then removing the causes. And that's the basis of treatment. Identifying cause, removing cause. Right? إذا وجد السبب وجد المسبب. If the cause is found, what it causes is likely to be found. And that is, of course, from the fruits of muhasaba, right? That if you're stuck in any sin, right? Sometimes the sin just happens, you just tripped up. So you make istighfar, you make tawbah, but the successful change is through identification of cause. That especially if a sin becomes a habit or you get stuck in it, what do you have to do? You have to identify what is the cause of the sin. What is the cause of the sin in your life and get rid of that cause. Right? And that's the only way that you can deal with it. Otherwise, you are you will be ever tormented. Right? You're ever tormented. So just like sometimes people have a particular problem, right? And this should be in the general toolkit. We'll be look at how we specifically apply it, but just to remind ourselves, right, that if you have any challenge in life, right, that you're having a problem, it's okay. Rather than fixate on the problem, how come I don't get up for tahajjud? Identify the causes. Treat the causes. Begin with the critical cause. Sometimes begin with the critical cause. What's the biggest cause? I sleep too late. Simple. Sometimes you deal with the easiest cause. Right? And there's outward causes, but frequently there's inward causes. Right? Inward causes such as what? Inward causes very often such as you are there's a virtue you want to uphold, but there's something odious that you're doing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is closing doors of divine facilitation. So here, when it comes to envy, it has no known causes, right? And he mentioned 6 of them, right? He says, وَهِيَ سِتَّةٌ. There are 6 key causes of envy. Should know the causes, identify what is it that is causing me to be envious of this person. And then each one has a way by which you remove that from yourself, right? Right? Each of them has a way that you remove them. Right? These 6 are ta'azzuz. Right? Ta'azzuz is, deeming yourself to be special. Right? Wa takabbur. Right? And to arrogate to yourself. Number 3, khawfu fawt al-maqsood. You fear that something that you seek, you'll miss out on if someone else got it. Right? So you're applying for a scholarship. Someone else put together an amazing application. So you fear if they get it, you won't. Right? The 4th is hubbur riyasa, love of leadership. If you see anyone attain a rank, a position, an honor that you wanted, then you will dislike that. And this is one of the last things that leave the hearts of the most noble of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's servants. Right? They say, آخر ما يخرج من قلوب الصادقين حب الرياسة. Of the last things that leaves the hearts of true servants of God is love of leadership. Right? Like love of status. Right? Right? The 5th is khubthun nafs, just vileness of self. You don't even want that thing yourself. Right? So Ghayn has decided to become a nasheed artist. So his friend Jim hates nasheed, doesn't care about nasheed, doesn't want to be a munshid by any means. He thinks it's a waste of time. But he's envious of ghain for no reason. Right? That's just khubthul nafs. And sixth is hiqd, is malice, just purely wanting ill for another. Right? And malice is like envy on steroids, right? And it's even worse than envy, right? Because envy is you want the other to lose some good, right? But malice, you want ill for them. It's compounded ill feeling. So he says, al-awwalu ta'azzuz, right? Right? At-ta'azzuz, right? Right? Ta'azzuz is deeming yourself special. Right? 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 And this often happens in causes with people who have nationalist sentiment or tribalist sentiment, right? You say, how could someone from Hims be appointed in this position? How could someone who's just a villager from rural Punjab, how could they get the job when we, whatever, right? Ta'azzuz, right? Either for group consideration or personal consideration. You have, so, هو أن يثقل عليه أن يترفع عليه غيره, that to find it heavy that someone else could be raised above them for whatever cause of this, right? Often happens with immigrants. Even actually immigrant communities tend to have this with newer immigrants, right? Right? They say, oh, he's just FOB, he's just fresh off the boat. Well, you're an immigrant too. You just came 20 years earlier, right? But is this like, how could they get that position? Because they don't have a life. Like, you start thinking that way. They don't have a life. They just sit there studying, and they're not real Canadian or real, all this kind of nonsense. فإذا أصاب بعض أمثاله ولاية أو علما أو مالا خاف أن يتكبر عليه وهو لا يطيق تكبره ولا تسمح نفسه باحتمال صلفه وتفاخره عليه، فليس غرضه التكبر عليه بل غرضه أن يدفع كبره ويرضى بمساواته له وزيادته عليه من غير تكبر. Right? So one finds it heavy, right? So if one finds that another be higher than one, heavy for oneself. So if another of one's peers or similars gets some position of leadership or acquires some knowledge or wealth, they fear that person will now impose themselves, they'll arrogate themselves over you. And you can't deal with them arrogating themselves over you. And yourself does not accept that you be dealt with from a position of authority by this other person, and that they take pride in over you. So here, the person's cause from takabbur towards them is, so the person's dislike of the person getting this blessing is not that you want to be above them, but just you don't want them to harm you in this way. Or you're fine with them being at your level, or that you're fine with them having more than you, but as long as they're not in a position to arrogate themselves over you. فإن أراد عدم وصوله إلى تلك النعمة أو زوالها مقيدة بالإفضاء إلى الكبر فليس بحسد لما مر. Right, so if you just don't want the blessing to reach them in order that they not harm you, right? Then this is not the prohibited envy, because it's not that you don't want them to get the blessing, you just don't want them to get the blessing insofar as they will harm you or harm someone else wrongfully, right? But there are more straightforward ways of asking about that, right? That you make tafweed, you ask Allah for protection. You ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection. He said, دَعَ الْخَلْقَ لِلْخَالِقِ, leave the creation to the creator. وَاطْلُبْ مِنْهُ الْخَيْرَ وَالسَّلَامَ, and ask Allah for good in all its manifestations. And ask Allah for protection in general. نسألك العصمة في الحركات والسكنات والكلمات والإرادات من الخطرات والشكوك والظنون والأوهام السراتية القلوب. Just ask Allah for complete protection, and He'll take care of all these things. Because as they say, the devil is in the details. You get, I don't want him to do this to me, and I don't want him to do, like, أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ, does the one who created not know? And does he not know what's good for you? Right? That's why this here, tafweed saves you. Consigning the matters to Allah. أُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, I consign my affair, both in the good I seek and the harm that I seek protection from, to Allah. Inna Allah basirun bil ibad. Truly Allah has complete awareness of His servant, of His servants. That is much safer than going into these things. Oh Allah, I'm only asking you not to give him this blessing in this manner, whatever. That's you could save yourself, but it's dangerous. If there's a cliff, like there's a ledge on a mountain, say you're safe as long as you stay 5 or 6 steps away from the complete edge. Don't go on the ledge to begin with. Is there any benefit in going on the ledge? No. The same, you can see the same thing a few steps behind the ledge, like an overhanging ledge on a mountain. A few steps back, the view is pretty much the same. Likewise, when it comes to these things. وَإِن مُطْلَقًا, and if you don't want them to achieve that good unconditionally, with the condition that, as because of the reason that they'll harm you or another, فَحَسَدْ, then it's envy and it's impermissible. لِعَدَمِ التَّيَقُّنِ بِالْفَسَادِ, because you don't know for sure that it'll be bad for them. وَإِمْكَانِ التَّقِيدِ, and you could have limited that asking. Right? That's why the Shaykh mentioned that harm is like darkness. You don't dispel darkness by fighting darkness, but rather you bring out the light. Right? So you don't fight in the shadows, right? Seek light. وَالثَّانِي, so that's this ta'azzuz, like, you find it difficult to accept the rank of another, but there could be a cause where you fear harm from it, but ask Allah to protect you from the harm. Don't seek ill for them. Leave their affair to the Creator. Right? والثاني الكبر فإن من في طبعه التكبر على الناس واستصغاره واستخدامه فإذا نال نعمة خاف أن لا يتحمل تكبره ويترفع عن متابعته وخدمته فيريد زوالها. Right? Another cause of someone being envious of another is the person envious having arrogance. Because if someone has the nature of being arrogant towards people and to look down on other people and to use other people, Then, if someone else achieves some blessing, the arrogant person who becomes envious fears that that person will no longer accept your arrogance. Right? They'll no longer accept that you look down upon them, you deem them small. They will no longer accept that you use them in your service. So, and they will no longer follow you and serve you. So therefore, the arrogant person, the mutakabbir, will seek that others not have their blessing. Right? So you want them to lose it. Right? وَعِلَاجُهُ سَبَقْ. He says, and its treatment has come before, which is the treatment of arrogance, which is to hold yourself, to be humble with them. And this happens, Alan Payton in Cry the Beloved Country says, quoting some of the oppressive class of South Africa, they said, we want help for the underdog, but we want them to stay under. Right? And this is sometimes, and they say, from the adab of a teacher with their students is to know when to let go of them. Right? In the sense that even if the student's coming to you for advice, etc., you give, and that's a sensitive relationship, right? In that transition between someone being a student and being a teacher themselves. And the adab of the student is to remain close to your teachers, but the adab of the teachers is to raise up the student and no longer treat them as a mere student. Right? That's why the ulama, right from the time of the Salaf, what do they call their students? They wouldn't call them atba'una, our followers. They wouldn't call them tullabuna, our students. They'd call them ashabuna, our companions. But the adab with that, once Shaykh Hassan al-Hindi told us told a few of us that, look, the adab with the teacher is that even if your teacher treats you like your peer, like that you're their peer, you treat them, the student treats their teacher as their senior. But the adab of the teacher is that's as students become more senior, that one gives them the respect and humility. That's why a lot of the ulama of Sham would refer to even young students as Shaykh Fulan, tafa'ulan bil khair, and so on. And they would be very careful about this matter. Right? And you see amazing examples of akhlaq related to how you ask the students for their opinion, this and that, and this is something that needs care. والثالث سببية نعمة الغير لفوت مقصوده. The third cause of envy is that you fear that another getting a blessing would be the cause for you losing it, for you losing out on your purpose. And this happens all the time, because anyone who's trying to achieve anything in this life, achieving anything requires means. Means are limited. So those who are trying to achieve anything, others are competing for them for limited money, limited recognition, limited attention, limited all these things. So whoever's goals are in this life, it is a given that they are susceptible to fall into envy. That's why envy between peers is so common. If their focus is on the worldly, right? So he says, وذلك يختص بمتزاحمين على مقصود واحد. And this is particular to those who are vying with one another, right, on a common goal. فإن كل واحد يحسد صاحبه في كل نعمة يكون زوالها عنه عونا له في الانفراد بمقصوده. Because each of them will, if they are worldlings or affected by worldly thinking, each of them will be susceptible to see every blessing that, if the other lost, would be a means for you to attain your goal. And this is a type of shirk khafi. Or at the very least, it is a type of materialist, worldly short-sightedness, right? That you're having your Ramadan fundraising campaign, another organization has their fundraising campaign. Says we can't promote them because if people give to them, they won't give to us. And if you're somehow able to say, oh, you know, organization, the Rain Foundation is sending their email out to their donors on Monday morning. Let's send it Sunday night so that we can circumvent their campaign. Or even worse, you do something to disrupt their campaign. Right. And this needs to be dealt with, right? Especially in sahat ad-din, in things like this have no place in things of religion. The very least is you're not duty bound to help another. It's recommended. But the least is don't have ill will towards them. They say there are 3 levels of fulfilling the rights of others. Right? The first is لا تؤذي. لا تؤذي أدي الحق أحسن. Right? These are the 3 levels. لا تؤذي, don't hate another. They say this is أساس الأدب. أساس الأدب and لا تؤذي أحدا. The foundation of adab is that you do not hurt another. Don't hurt anybody. Can't do any good, at least don't hurt anybody. You can't muster any goodwill towards your best friend's educational project. Don't do anything harmful. Don't say anything harmful. Don't will anything harmful. You can't muster a dua. You should cry about how miserable you are, but at least you missed out on reward and opportunity of cultivating faith and virtue, but at least you did not damn yourself. But the other is أدي الحق, fulfill the rights. And some of these are recommended rights. تعاونوا على البر والتقوى. Assist one another in virtue and good, all aspects of goodness, bir and taqwa, and all manifestations of mindfulness. Okay? لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you believes until they wish for others what they wish for themselves. As students of knowledge progress, this happens to students of knowledge. It's a given. Unless you're taking means to avoid this, this happens all the time. Happens between ulama, happens between activists, happens between worldly people in their professions. This is, everybody's in it. فهذا الحسد يكون بين الأمثال والأقران كالضرات والإخوة. This kind of envy happens between similars and contemporaries, such as 2 wives, right? And they're called in classical darrat. They differ why they're called darrat. One of them is that 2 wives, each wants to harm the other from darar, right? Wal ikhwa, and between siblings, and this is one of the most neglected things, that one of the places where envy is most frequent and most neglected is between siblings, right? whether with respect to their careers or with respect to their parents' attention and favor, or socially. There are many manifestations of sibling rivalry, right, resulting in sibling envy. And very often people say, oh, but he's just my brother, she's just my sister. Exactly. So it's not because the closer you are, the more likely it is that these things happen. There is often spousal envy. Spousal envy. Right? Husband decided to sacrifice from his career to facilitate his wife's career as well. Now he's envious of her. How come she got success? Look at what I had to sacrifice, etc. Right? So this happens, right? بقصد يقصدون المنزلة في قلب الزوج والأبوين وتلامذة أستاذ. They seek standing in the heart of the spouse or the parents, right? Or within the family, same thing happens. And between students of a teacher, right? يعني أستاذ واحد ومريدي شيخ واحد, or between the murids of the same sheikh, right? And there's a nice, really good definition here of a murid, right? So, why is the seeker, the murid called a seeker? سمي المريد مريدا لإرادته وجه الله تعالى. The seeker is called the seeker because they're seeking the countenance of Allah, meaning Allah Himself. بترك ما عليه العادة, by leaving mere habits. من التفريج في مواطن الغفلة, from just looking by distracted looking around in the places of heedlessness. والركون إلى اتباع الشهوة, and by inclining towards the places of inclining towards the following of desire. وترك ما دعت إليه المنية بالتزام المجاهدات, and leaving what المنية, what one's wishes call you to, by holding yourself to spiritual acts of spiritual discipline. وتحمل المكابدات, and by bearing difficult effort, والمصاعب, and hardship, والمتاعب, and the things that cause one toil, ومعالجة الأخلاق, and to treat difficult traits of character, وممارسة الأشواق, and to engage in the expressions of passionate yearning for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And there's a beautiful quote from the Risala al-Qushayriya. You can read it in Maulana al-Khadimi's Sharh. Some of you may not have the Sharh, so we can share the image here. This is a beautiful discussion. Right? And it's good to try to catch these. Inshallah, someone could annotate this, give it a file name, whatever. Inshallah, Sidi Zain. So that's who the seeker is. And if you consider it being a seeker, the reality is that students of knowledge forget that seeking of knowledge is praiseworthy if it's for the sake of Allah. So you have to always ask every component of seeking knowledge, is this for Allah? If it's not, leave it. Right? Likewise, the spiritual path is not about the sheikh. It's not about the path. It's not about the dress. It's not about the social milieu of that. Oh, the sheikh loves me. So what? Right? Right? As Imam, as one of the great Rifa'is said, in a point, طريقنا لله ما فيه غير الله عن أحمد الأواه أتاك عقد الدر طريقنا مبناه ما فيه إلا الله فخذ إذا معناه في نظمنا والنثر. He says, right? طريقنا لله. Our path is to Allah. There is nothing in it but Allah. Meaning anything in it is only, all that is part of the path to Allah is that which is lillahi ta'ala. That's it. Nothing else is from the path. طريقنا مبناه, the foundation of our path, the path to Allah. ما فيه إلا الله. There is nothing in it but Allah. Meaning that which is for Allah, that which is pleasing to Allah. Okay? عن أحمد الأواهي, from Ahmad, the passionately penitent. أتك عقد الدري, it has come like a precious string of pearls. Right? So all this other stuff is just dunya. Dunya in religious dress. وَنُدَمَاءِ الْمَلِكِ, and those close to the king, وَخَوَاصِهِ, and his entourage. وَوُعَاظِ بَلْدَةٍ وَاحِدَةٍ, and the preachers of the same town. Each one wants the attention. وَطُلَّابِ وِلَايَةٍ وَقَضَاءٍ, and those who are seeking positions and to be judges. وَتَدْرِيسٍ, and they want to be the teacher. وَتَوْلِيَةِ أَوْقَافٍ, and they want to be granted the responsibility for endowments, because you have then control over a whole bunch of money. أَوْ جِهَةٍ مِنْ جِهَاتِهَا, or any of the ways that waqf funds are directed. وَمَآلُهُ حُبُّ الْمَالِ أَوْ الرِّيَاسَةِ, and all of these causes of envy go back to love of wealth or status, which is the next of the causes of envy. So he tells, so you have to be on the watch that anyone, right, especially in a materialist age like this, where everyone or so many people are driven, I'm trying to achieve something. Okay, be careful of envy, because others are trying to achieve it too. And in deen, it's particularly important, right? And at every stage, right, uphold nusх, right? There is the you know, there is the wellness. At every step, uphold goodwill. And for a lot of people, that's very difficult, right? والرابع مجرد حب الرياسة كمن يريد أن يكون عديم النظر في فن من الفنون ويغلب عليه حب الثناء فإذا سمع بنظير له في أقصى العالم ساءه ذلك وأحب موته وزوال النعمة التي بها يشاركه في المنزلة من شجاعة أو علم أو عبادة أو صناعة أو جمال أو ثروة. Right? So the fifth cause of envy is pure love of leadership or status, right? Such that someone who wants to be unique, without comparison in any of the sciences, of knowledge, like in Islamic knowledge, and they love to be praised. Right, so this idea of people, you're wanting to be influencers, and how many followers do you have, and you're trying to maximize this and so on. Your love of prestige, that's it's not a new thing. It's just old wine in new bottles, and it's still as najis as it ever was. It's always been there. So if such a person hears of someone like them, even on the other side of the world, they have a dislike of that, and they want them even to die and to lose the blessing that they share of similar status, whether it be in courage or knowledge or worship or in any industry or in beauty. And this is frequent amongst women, but not only, right? So many men spend so many time putting up pictures of whatever they have. right? Or of wealth. The fifth cause of envy is خبث النفس. خبث النفس وشحها بالخير is violence of temperament and it being stingy with respect to the good. لعباد الله تعالى, towards other servants. فإنك تجد من لا يشتغل برياسة وتكبر وطلب مال, because you find people who don't busy themselves with status or leadership or arrogance or gathering wealth. فإذا وصف عنده حسن حال عبد, but if any good quality of anybody is described to them, في نعمة, in any blessing, يشق عليه, they find that difficult. وإذا وصف له اضطراب أمور الناس, but if you describe to them the disturbed state of people, وإدبارهم وفوات مقاصدهم فرح به. But if you mention bad news about people and and crises and disturbances, this from the secrets of why bad news sells more than good news. Because even when people ooh and ah about it, people rejoice in the misfortune of others. Because all of us have khubth within, right? And they rejoice in it, either openly or they find a deep satisfaction in it. Right? فهو أبدا يحب الإدبار لغيره ويبخل بنعمة الله تعالى على عباده. So such a person always likes blessings to leave people, and they're stingy with respect to wanting Allah's blessings for others. الذين ليس بينهم وبينه عداوة ولا رابطة, even though you have no enmity towards them nor any point of connection. وهذا أخبث الحسد, and this is the vilest of envy. وأعسره إزالة وعلاجة, and the most difficult of it to treat and cure. لأنه طبع وجبلة, because it becomes a nature and a temperament, or temperament and nature. يكاد يستحيل في العادة زواله, and it's almost impossible normally to remove it, right? But it needs active effort, right? It needs active effort to work on, right? Right? It needs active effort to work on. The last of the causes of envy is malice, right? And we'll look at that next week, malice, because he says وَالسَّادِسُ الْحِقْدِ وهو السادس عشر من آفات القلب. And the sixth cause of envy is malice, which is the 16th of the blameworthy traits of the heart. Right? Imam al-Ghazali added a seventh cause, which is التعجب, conceit. Because a conceited person, you think very highly of yourself, and conceit is slightly different from arrogance, as we saw. Right? When you see someone who is better than you, it's like mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the greatest of them all? And you think it's, who's the most impressive? No, you're like, no need to answer. I know the answer. So within, you feel this self-satisfaction. Then that also, but that's similar to takabbur. That's why others than Imam Ghazali, some of them kept it. To look at what is malice, which is you want ill for the person themselves, right? So we'll look at that, and because that is of the destructive vices, right? And they're interrelated. Envy, which is related to loss of blessing. Malice, you want ill for the person themselves. They are interrelated, right? And they're two of the cardinal vices. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma inna nas'aluka taharat al-qalb min kulli ma takrahuhu wa min kulli ma yub'idu anka wa an ridak wa mahabbatik ويبعد عن حضرتك يا رب العالمين، وخلقنا بكل خلق من أخلاق النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مما يقرب إليك ويجعلنا من أهل قربك ورضاك ومحبتك ومشاهدتك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلي وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله وصحبه وأمته إلى يوم الدين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. بارك الله تعالى فيكم. We'll take any questions before we close for the night?
Shaykh Faraz, when it comes to envy, so usually when people are in competitive places, that's when it mostly comes up. So is it better for a person to take themselves out of the competitive situation, or is it better to stay in it while trying to uphold all those previous treatments we talked about?
Yeah. No, so the thing is, the most important thing is that if one doesn't take care of the purity of one's heart and state and intentions and aims, one will always be in a mess, right? Because if someone is competing with others, you'll be envious. But then if Ghain, for example, who has envy, if he says, okay, I'm not going to compete with them, then he's going to have malice towards them, right? Right? So it's safer, right? It is safer, so it is safer to step back from competitiveness, right? But there is a tanafus that is mahmood. There is a competitiveness that is praiseworthy. فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ, right? Vie with one another in the good, right? In the good. But the mabna, the basis of things are intention, right? That one has to work. That why am I doing this? Make your intention for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is my purpose? So the intention should be good. The purpose should be good. How am I doing this? What am I doing? What I'm doing is good. How am I doing it? It is good. So one takes care of these four truths. Right? There's a beautiful article in Seekers based on one of the really great scholars of the 20th century, Shaykh al-Islam Shabbir Uthmani, and we can share the link, inshallah, on the four keys of success. He mentions it in one of his writings, that if there's four things that are true, then one is successful. So if one approaches it in that way, then how does one view others? How does one view others? That one makes tanafus, but whoever it is, even in purely worldly things, right? One wants good for them. One wants good for them, right? Right? And one wants good for oneself. That's nusх. But also, one should, from the beginning, one of the ways to safeguard against negative envy, because against envy arises either when someone gets something that you wanted, or when you fear that they get it rather than you. So one of the preemptive ways is, like, if, let's say you're applying for a job and you're like, well, my friend is applying for the job. So from the beginning, you take into mind, okay, if they get it, I'll be happy for them. I want the good. If they get it, I'm happy with them. From the beginning, right? Like some of the ulama, although this doesn't work as advice for everybody, but they say that if you want to analyze whether you should do something, say, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario, you'll die. If you're fine with the worst case scenario, everything below it is also fine, right? But that doesn't work for everybody, right? Because it gets some people really scared. But in that sense, there's a reality that, in most jobs, etc., there's limited applicants. If you apply this to its fullest limited way, you would never apply for a job, right? Because if you put 10 applications, 9 out of 10 times for most people, someone else will get the job. And if you're in a specialized field or whatever, the person who got the job, you probably know them, right? So when we approach, because we have our maqasid dunyawiyya and we have maqasid diniyya, it's almost inevitable that there will be these things. But we just have to work on our intention, purpose, how we do things, but also how we view others in this space, which is we approach them with nusх, and we shield. But nusх not only when things are good. Inshallah, I'll get, because the reality isn't that everybody will get what they wanted, right? So that even if someone else got it, right? And I'm a believer, so I know الخير فيما اختاره الله ما أصابك لم يكن ليخطئك. Whatever hit you wasn't going to miss. وما أخطأك لم يكن ليصيبك. And whatever missed you was never going to hit, right? Etc. So we know these truths of faith, right? And there, otherwise there's no safety, right? Otherwise there's no safety, right? That's why some of the early, some of the Sahaba, when they called kings and stuff, they said, ندعوك أن تخرج من ضيق الدنيا إلى سعة الآخرة. We call you to leave the constriction of worldliness, right, to the expansiveness of the next life, right? Because that's the dunya. That's if someone's dunyawi, they go from one woe to the other. نسأل إلا ما ندر. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى التيسير والعافية.